Welcome back, sleepy traveler. Tonight's tale is not for the faint of heart. But don't worry, we'll tell it gently, because while the body may heal with rest, the mind drifts better when it's curious. And nothing is more curious than the long, strange history of medicine. For centuries, humans have tried to heal what they didn't understand. They cut, they bled, they burned, they wrapped, scraped, poked, and purged. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it made things far, far worse. So tonight, let's lie down and wander through the quiet corridors of medical history. From the shadowed temples of Egypt to candlelit apothecaries to the back rooms of plague hospitals, all in search of cures that were often stranger and scarier than the diseases themselves. Take a breath. Pull up your blanket. Let's begin. Ancient Egypt, where illness met incantation. Our story starts in ancient Egypt, where medicine was a strange blend of science and sorcery. The Egyptians believed that illness could be caused by evil spirits, blocked channels in the body, or even angry gods. To treat disease, they didn't just use herbs and poultices. They used magic spells, amulets, and rituals performed by priest-physicians. One treatment for headaches? A mix of crushed herbs, donkey fat, and boiled goose grease, smeared onto the scalp while chanting to Thoth, the god of wisdom. For infections or internal illness, patients were often given enemas, administered using reeds and animal bladders. They believed that flushing the body cleaned the spirit. And in especially sacred healing temples, patients would lie in a ritual bed to await a dream visit from a god. Usually Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague and healing. She might whisper the cure, or simply scare the sickness away. But don't laugh too hard. Egyptian surgeons were shockingly skilled. They could set broken bones, sew wounds with linen thread, and even perform basic brain surgery, called trepanation, by scraping a hole in the skull to relieve pressure. Anesthesia? None. Just grit and prayers. Bloodletting and balance. Now we drift westward to the marble temples of Greece and the bustling streets of Rome. Here, medicine took on a new theory. The body was made of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you got sick, it meant those humors were out of balance. The most common solution was bloodletting. Doctors used knives, sharpened seashells, or later leeches to remove blood and restore equilibrium. Feeling feverish? Too much blood? Let some out. Suffering from melancholy? Probably too much black bile. Time for a purgative. They also used cupping, vomiting agents, and herbal purges to flush the system. One Roman physician, Galen, believed in cutting veins on specific parts of the body to target certain organs, sort of like a violent game of connect the dots. And this wasn't just for the poor. Even emperors, generals, and philosophers lined up to be sliced open for balance. Some patients were drained of over a liter of blood at once. And if they died, well, at least they were no longer imbalanced. Cautery and fire medicine. In both East and West, Another favorite cure was burning the sickness out. Cauterization was used to stop bleeding, close wounds, and even treat things like epilepsy or madness. Healers would heat a rod until it glowed red hot and press it directly onto the skin. In some traditions, they burned specific points on the body, often along veins or near the spine, to release heat or drive out illness. In medieval Islamic medicine, cautery was highly systematized with detailed manuals showing where to burn for various problems. To us, it sounds barbaric, but to them, it was precision. And in truth, sometimes it worked. But sometimes it left scars deeper than the disease ever did. So far, we've bled the body, burned the flesh, and begged the gods for mercy. And this is just the beginning. In Part 2, we'll explore medieval cures, plague doctors, and the rise of treatments so bizarre they border on horror. But all were real, and all were tried in the desperate hope of healing.
Our blanket is tucked. The night is calm. And yet, history is about to get much stranger. Because while the ancient world brought ritual and theory into medicine, the Middle Ages brought something else. Fear. Fear of death. Fear of sin. Fear of unseen forces, devils, miasmas, curses. And when fear takes hold, treatments become desperate. Tonight, we visit the shadowed apothecaries and plague-ridden alleys of medieval Europe, where medical solutions often hurt far more than helped. Let's begin with the darkest of all, the Black Death, and the doctors who wore beaks. The 14th century brought one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, the Black Death. It swept through Europe, killing up to 60% of the population. People didn't understand bacteria or viruses. They thought the disease was caused by bad air, miasma, or even God's punishment. So treatments, let's just say they were creative. Enter the plague doctor. You know the image: long robe, wide-brimmed hat, and that eerie bird-like mask. But why a beak? The hollow beak was stuffed with rose petals, herbs, and vinegar-soaked sponges, meant to filter out the bad air. The outfit was like a medieval hazmat suit, though it offered little real protection. As for treatments, some patients were bled, again, forced to drink mercury, covered in crushed emeralds or onions, or wrapped in bread soaked in pus, hoping the bread would draw out the plague. Many people turned to flagellants, groups who whipped themselves publicly, believing physical punishment could stop divine wrath. And still, the plague spread. Boils, balms, and bath-time terrors. One common symptom of the plague was the appearance of buboes, large, painful swellings. To treat them, doctors recommended lancing the buboes with a red-hot knife, applying a mixture of figs, yeast, and crushed human excrement, or covering them with dried toads, sliced open and placed directly onto the skin. It was believed the toads could suck the poison.
Some medieval guides also suggested sitting in a sewer. Yes, an actual sewer, so that the worse smells of the place would overpower the plague in the body. If that sounds foul, it was. And yet, they tried it. Because when you're desperate, even filth can feel like a cure. The barber surgeon's chair. Let's say you weren't dying of plague, just suffering from a wound or a fever. You might visit a barber surgeon. Yes, barbers didn't just cut hair, they pulled teeth, set bones, drained abscesses, and performed minor surgeries. Their tools? Sharp knives, iron hooks, hot coals, wooden mallets. They had no anesthesia, no antiseptic, just a firm grip and sometimes a prayer. Patients were often tied to chairs or held down by assistants. One treatment for mental illness involved drilling a small hole in the skull, again, trepanation, to let the madness escape. This wasn't fringe medicine, it was mainstream. And if you survived, you were considered lucky, even heroic. The belief in fumes and flatulence. Medical thinkers in the Middle Ages were obsessed with smells. They believed foul air caused disease, so countersmells were used to drive it out. Doctors recommended patients inhale burning sulfur, smoke from rotten leather, fumes from boiled urine or burned feathers. In one odd case, people were told to fart into jars, seal them, and reopen them when they felt sick, because the familiar scent might cancel out bad humors. And yes, this was written in actual medical manuals. It's easy to laugh, but to them it was chemistry. In a world without microscopes or antibiotics, everything was trial and error, with heavy emphasis on error. Sleep, suffering, and spiritual healing. In monasteries and nunneries, healing took a different form. Monks and nuns offered herbal remedies, prayer, and quiet. Some believed sleep was the body's way of purging sin, so they encouraged dreaming, meditation, and long fasts. But even here, some treatments were odd. Wearing a parchment inscribed with Bible verses around the neck, drinking water that had soaked a saint's relic, or sleeping with a dead animal beneath the bed to draw out sickness. At least the beds were softer than a plague cart.
We've survived bleeding, burning, and bath time with toads. Now we step into the era of reason, the Renaissance and early age of enlightenment. Surely now, with telescopes turned to the heavens and books flowing from printing presses, medicine became more civilized, right? Well, sort of. Because for every leap forward, like dissection, anatomy, and surgical precision, there were still moments of spectacular weirdness. Let's drift into this strange and ambitious time. Drinking gold, eating mummies, and other fancy cures. In 16th century Europe, rich patients wanted luxurious medicine. So, naturally, doctors gave them gold. Yes, liquid gold, known as aurum potabile, was believed to restore youth, energy, and even intelligence. Alchemists worked tirelessly to turn base metals into gold and elixirs of immortality. Some physicians blended gold dust, alcohol, and exotic herbs into shimmering tonics. Others sold unicorn horn powder, really narwhal tusk, for fortune and fertility. But the strangest elite medicine of the era? Mumia. That's right, ground-up Egyptian mummies, sold as a healing powder. Doctors believed that preserved human flesh, especially from ancient and noble corpses, held powerful properties. It was taken for headaches, bruises, bleeding, and even internal illnesses. By the 17th century, demand for mummy powder was so high that grave robbers and forgers supplied fakes, even using fresh corpses from criminals or the poor, disguised as ancient. Yes, they literally ate the dead, and they thought it was healing. Tobacco enemas and the birth of the bellows. As the New World brought new ingredients, potatoes, tomatoes, and tobacco, Europeans found interesting ways to use them. Tobacco wasn't just smoked, it was also blown into the rectum as a medical treatment. Known as the tobacco smoke enema, this practice was believed to revive drowning victims, cure intestinal issues, and treat headaches or cold limbs. Physicians used a long tube, sometimes connected to a fire-warmed bellows, to puff tobacco smoke into the patient's body. It sounds ridiculous today, but at the time, it was cutting-edge revival therapy. You could even find tobacco enema kits on riverbanks near lifeguard stations in 18th century England. Imagine being rescued, only to wake up with a smoke pipe in a very personal place. Radium water and electric baths. As the centuries turned and science progressed, people fell in love with technology. And as the 1800s became the 1900s, there was a dazzling new discovery: radioactivity. It glowed, it buzzed, it was mysterious. So, naturally, they drank it. Radium and uranium were added to water bottles, toothpaste, skin creams, and even chocolate. One popular brand was Radiothor, a tonic promising energy, sex appeal, and mental clarity. Wealthy socialites sipped it daily, until some of them, quite literally, glowed in the dark. One millionaire drank so much Radiothor, his jaw rotted and fell off before he died of radiation poisoning. Electricity was another craze. People bathed in electric tubs, wore electric belts, and used static wands on their scalps to stimulate growth or mood. It was all very modern and very risky. Dog fat, earthworms, and snail slime. Even as science advanced, folk remedies continued in kitchens and cottages. Some 18th century physicians still prescribed earthworm oil for arthritis, snail slime for cough and wounds, and dog fat for chest congestion, rubbed into the skin with hot towels. In parts of France and Germany, frog soup was given to treat tuberculosis. And in England, powdered skull, sometimes from executed criminals, was mixed into wine to stop seizures. You were what you ate, and sometimes that included your neighbors. Cures for madness. Asylums rose across Europe, but mental illness remained deeply misunderstood. Some treatments included spinning chairs, where patients were rapidly spun until they vomited in hopes to rebalance the brain. Cold water therapy, plunging patients into icy water to shock them into clarity. And isolation boxes, where patients sat alone in silence for days. One theory proposed that madness was caused by overheated brains, so metal caps filled with iced vinegar were worn to cool the skull. Others suggested patients sleep with cabbage leaves tied to their temples. Compassion was growing, slowly, but fear and guesswork still ruled much of psychiatric care. In Part 4, we'll enter the 19th and 20th centuries, where snake oil meets surgery, and some of the strangest modern cures were still in use. Glass eyes, rubber tongues, radioactive toothpaste, and more await.
We've wandered through plague masks and golden tonics, mummies and mercury. Now we enter the bustling world of the 19th and early 20th centuries, an era of astonishing discovery, but also rampant medical chaos. Before regulations, before science caught up, the shelves were lined with mystery bottles. And behind every label was a promise. Cure-all, instant relief, miracle elixir. Tonight, we peek into the colorful and often dangerous world of modern medicine before it was modern. Snake oil and traveling cures. The term snake oil salesman didn't come from nowhere. In the late 1800s, especially in America, medicine became a booming business. Traveling doctors went town to town selling cure-alls from wagons, often dressed in lab coats or top hats. They claimed their bottles could fix anything: toothaches, cramps, hysteria, baldness, bad dreams. And the ingredients? A wild mix of alcohol, opium, chloroform, cocaine, or even arsenic, all in decorative glass with gold leaf labels. One popular remedy, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, was given to teething babies and contained morphine. Another, cocaine toothache drops, was sold for kids. Needless to say, the kids probably stopped crying, but only because they were very, very high. Rubber tongues and mechanical organs. Doctors of the time weren't just selling tonics, they were also inventing contraptions. Got a weak voice? A rubber tongue exerciser might help. You'd strap it inside your mouth and move it around to strengthen the vocal cords. Need help breathing? Try a mechanical lung bellows operated by a crank. There were belts that buzzed with electricity, goggles that filtered brain waves, and corsets that claimed to rearrange your organs for better health. Some hospitals even had vibrating beds, steam cabinets, and electroshock shoes. And while some ideas had merit, most were more noise than healing. Arsenic, lead, and the element of danger. Despite rising awareness of toxins, dangerous chemicals were still used, often as beauty aids or tonics. In Victorian England, women swallowed arsenic wafers to brighten their skin. It worked by destroying red blood cells, leaving skin pale and ghostly. Others used lead face powder or mercury eye drops, believing it made them look more alert. Meanwhile, men used lead combs to darken their beards and radium hair gels to energize the scalp. And in one particularly strange invention, a company sold uranium jock traps for men who wanted virility and stamina through radiant energy. Yes, they wore uranium underwear. Corpse therapy? Still alive. Even into the 1800s, remnants of earlier practices lingered. In Germany and Britain, it was still believed that drinking fresh blood from executed criminals could cure epilepsy. Some poor patients would gather at public hangings, not for justice, but to collect blood in cups. Others sought cures in the king's touch,
where monarchs would lay hands on the sick, especially those with scrofula, a form of tuberculosis, to heal by divine power. This belief lasted centuries, long after monarchs themselves stopped believing it. Lobotomy and the quest to fix the mind. As mental illness became more visible, doctors searched for surgical solutions. The most infamous? The lobotomy. In the 1940s and 50s, thousands of people, often those with depression, anxiety, or even teenage rebellion, were treated with this brutal procedure. A sharp metal pick was inserted through the eye socket, then swirled to sever connections in the frontal lobe. Patients often emerged calm, but vacant, and sometimes they never spoke again. The doctor who popularized the lobotomy even drove cross-country, performing them out of his van, which he proudly called his lobotomobile. It was seen as a miracle cure, until it wasn't. Heroin for cough, Coca-Cola for headaches. In the early 20th century, drug companies refined opium into heroin, which they sold as a non-addictive alternative to morphine. Yes, heroin for children with cough. Bayer, the same company that makes aspirin, proudly marketed it. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola really did contain cocaine, small doses mixed with caffeine originally used for headaches and fatigue. At the time, neither drug was illegal, and both were praised as modern marvels. It was the golden age of better living through chemistry, and most patients didn't know what hit them. In Part 5, we'll gently reflect on how far we've come and the strange, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying human desire to heal at any cost. Because even the strangest cures come from hope.
We've traveled far tonight, across smoky temples, through candlelit sickbeds, into the hands of barbers, alchemists, and traveling salesmen. We've witnessed the cutting, the burning, the swallowing of things better left unspoken. And through it all, one strange, quiet truth has emerged. People weren't cruel. They were trying. They were scared, curious, sometimes brilliant, sometimes desperate, but always, always human. This final chapter isn't just about the oddities of medicine, it's about what they reveal about us. Let's close our journey with the stories of healing that transcend the cure. The rise of regulation and the fall of quackery. By the early 20th century, science began to catch up with medicine. Microscopes revealed bacteria. Germ theory replaced miasmas. Sterilization, antiseptics, and anesthesia changed everything. And with each discovery, regulation followed. Governments began banning dangerous tonics. Medical schools required actual training. Laws were passed to protect patients from poisons sold as cures. The traveling snake oil wagons disappeared. The powdered skulls vanished. The glowing radium cocktails were shelved. Doctors were expected to rely on evidence, not elixirs. And for the first time in centuries, being sick didn't mean being experimented on. It meant being helped. Medicine becomes gentle, mostly. With progress came compassion. Hospitals became cleaner. Doctors stopped relying on pain to prove a cure was working.
Children were vaccinated. Antibiotics cured infections once considered fatal. Mental illness was slowly destigmatized. Yet medicine remained a balance between hope and humility. Even the best intentions could go too far. Radium therapy turned into radiation therapy, a miracle, but also a danger. Insulin therapy treated psychosis, but often caused seizures. Early chemotherapy killed cancer cells and nearly everything else too. Still, the shift was undeniable. From superstition to science. From suffering alone to shared understanding. What strange cures can teach us? It's easy to laugh at the frog poultices and tobacco enemas, to shudder at leech jars and lobotomies. But beneath each strange treatment lies a very human wish to feel better, to protect a loved one, to keep living. When a Roman mother fed her child powdered emerald, or a Victorian man drank arsenic for glowing skin, or a plague victim sat in a sewer hoping to sweat out the death, they weren't being foolish. They were doing what they could with what little they knew. Medicine is not just a science. It is a story of pain, trial, courage, and evolution. In sleep, even the sick find peace. And here we are now, not on a surgeon's table or in a smoky infirmary, but safe, still, tucked in. And that, too, is part of healing. Because rest has always been medicine. Sleep has always been a salve. For centuries, physicians advised the sick, lie down, drink something warm, wait. And while they sometimes got the rest wrong, they always knew the value of stillness. So tonight, in your own quiet moment, remember this. You are part of a long, strange, and resilient line of humans who faced fear, chased hope, and dreamed of feeling whole. Final words, the gentle art of trying. In the end, medicine isn't just about bodies. It's about trying to make sense of being fragile, of being alive. And even the most peculiar treatments were just people trying to fix something that hurt. They made mistakes, big ones, some even fatal. But they moved us forward. So tonight, let them fade into the hush of history. Let the beak-masked doctors and whispering monks and glowing tonic bottles rest in peace. And let yourself drift knowing this: we're all still learning. And sometimes the most powerful medicine is a story before sleep. Good night.